What's up, guys? Like last week, I couldn't figure out a place to put this the sponsorship video, so I'm going to do it here in the beginning. But yeah, hopefully like the newer sponsorship video. Also, episode 9 today with one of my own professors. All right, guys, here is the sponsorship video. Thank you, Spurzo, for sponsoring this video. Much appreciated to you guys. As always, links in the description box down below. And here is the podcast, number 9. Hey, guys. Welcome to our 9th episode of our podcast. I am the Rhino. Unfortunately, the Bat is out today handling some personal stuff. But anyways, today I got my own Professor Fun. I'm going to butcher your last name.
Frontczak. It's easier than it looks.
Frontczak, who is who currently has a PhD in philosophy, is a communications professor at Santa Clara University, Levi School of Business, and has a lot of experience in the business sector. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Cool. So I guess the first question I'll ask you is, did I miss anything when I was introducing you?
Well, no, not really. I have I've been working on a second professional education. So
Nice.
As far as background goes, I suppose that's worth something. And no, long time in business as well. Very
Cool.
much does it.
Cool. So I guess the next question will be, how did you get into business?
How did I get into business? Well, that's interesting. I was thinking about that because when I finished my graduate degree, I had an internship with the U.S. State Department in the Office of Cultural Affairs, and specifically in Policy and Planning.
Kind of a left turn, ain't it?
Well, it wasn't really. I mean, I applied. They had my qualifications. They had the fact that I was a recent grad in philosophy. And I think because it was policy and planning, and because my dissertation was in the area of cultural hermeneutics, I think it seemed like a good fit. So, and I was done with academics at that point. I had gone from kindergarten through PhD without a break, summers and everything. And of all the places that I could think of going to work, a university was about the last one on my list. I was ready.
I don't blame you, Professor.
In any academic environment. So something that looked like it made a difference in the world. And certainly I had lived overseas. I had gone to high school in Europe, and I was very interested in international relations. And so this looked like a nice opportunity. And indeed it was. I loved being there. And I went from there to work for the National Endowment for the Arts, also in the Office of Policy and Planning. And certainly my degree in philosophy, if anything, philosophy teaches you to ask questions. When I'm teaching a philosophy class, I say, this is only a class on asking questions. I'm sorry, we're not going to give you the answers. So if that's going to disappoint you, then you should leave now. But we'll ask a lot of questions. So in some jobs, particularly in policy and planning, that is a capability that is often needed. And so I loved that work in Washington. I loved working at the Arts Endowment. And from there went to work for a public relations firm that specialized in cause marketing, as a lot of organizations in Washington do. They're interested in advancing, some sort of ideas of, political cause.
Right.
And so that's what I was doing. And, for various reasons, I left that firm because I had been volunteering. I had taken a trip out to San Francisco, yeah, in part of my work with the Arts Endowment. And at the endowment, I had led a national planning process. So I had town halls all over the country. I had a town hall in San Francisco. We had 9 different regions. And we were trying to develop a national policy to support locally based artistic programs, which at the time had no channel for funding at the endowment. So the endowment only funded large scale organizations with budgets over a certain number of millions of dollars. And it was a very dynamic time in locally based grassroots arts programs. And so I was leading this planning process to get input from people all around the country, all different interest perspectives, urban, rural, labor unions, individual artists, performing arts, everybody, what kind of policy at the national level would support them. And in the course of that, I had been in San Francisco, and I had met some folks that I'd been to an event that I found pretty inspiring. And so at one point I learned that they were looking for people to lead organizing efforts, grassroots organizing efforts in communities where the standard of living was not acceptable to the people who lived there.
Interesting.
And that involved a lot of urban disadvantaged communities. And I was very interested in that. So I applied, and they hired me as a faculty member to lead these workshops. And that's when I came out to San Francisco. And from there, I worked for that. That was a nonprofit, but we were affiliated with a number of businesses that also did similar work with business leaders who wanted to effect transformational change in their companies. And I made connections with some of those leaders. I started doing writing projects and designing educational and training programs for them. And then ultimately, I went to work for myself full-time as a consultant in leadership development and communications for executives. And that's how I landed, a very long roundabout way of landing in business.
Cool. That's very interesting. I didn't really think about you coming, or think about a professor coming like from philosophy all the way to business in that kind of fashion.
Yeah, it wasn't a plan. I didn't go out and say, okay, here's the career ladder. My next step is going to be, and in fact, I'm kind of in awe of students today that really do have it all mapped out. I did not have it mapped out, but I was also young when I was in graduate school, and I just studied what interested me.
Right.
Silly me. And I think in many respects that helps when you follow your interests and you follow what you do well, that helps channel your efforts into things that are going to be where you can be most productive. So I didn't go into marketing because, gee, there's a need in business for marketing these days. I went into marketing because I was good in communication and I was good at developing programs. And that's what companies needed a lot, was people who could speak what we do in a way that is effective and that translates effectively. So I have had clients in Fortune 500 companies. I've had clients in much smaller businesses. I've had clients with nonprofits, and I've had clients in the public sector, but much more so in communications and leadership development rather than just in straight, okay, we're going to do a marketing plan here.
Cool. So I guess the question kind of branching out from here is that obviously Silicon Valley is a bubble in itself, and compared to like New York City or Austin or Kansas City or something else, how does communication affect the bubble that is Silicon Valley as well as outside of Silicon Valley?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and it's something that I look forward to hearing from our graduate students a lot, because you guys are in the trenches, right? You're in businesses in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And I just live in this little ivory tower in Santa Clara University talking to you guys. But in my experience, I think that there is a pace in Silicon Valley that is very fast.
Right.
And it's a different kind of fast than New York. New York is fast, but because we are so connected with the tech sector, and because people are so forward-looking in innovation and technology,
Right.
I think that there is an expectation that people are working and thinking creatively all the time. It's not like you're on sometimes and then, you know, oh, well, there's a couple of weeks where you're down. If you're down for a couple of weeks, you're out of business. You know, you just, you know, you are.
Yes.
So I think that the pace of innovation
Right.
and the encouragement for making connections across disciplines and across functions, I think there's a much more welcoming environment in Silicon Valley than there is in a lot of other places where there are more entrenched
Right.
pathways or, you know, silos for doing certain things. So in that way, it's really exciting. I think there's a lot that can get done in Silicon Valley, and you know, of course, there's also problems. Every business has its problems. So
Right. And obviously, some companies have bigger problems than others, and
yes, some companies have big, and if you make a colossal mistake, it gets noticed really fast because of the pace of things. You don't have that luxury of, well, gee, maybe they won't figure that out for a few weeks. Oh no, they'll figure it out in a matter of hours.
yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, social media and the 24-hour news cycle is so effective that if you make a mistake at, let's just say 9 p.m. today, the entire world will know what happened within 12 hours from now, from then. So you're all sorts of effed up if you make a mistake.
Yeah. And I think that that has to do with the way that individuals are perceived as well, because, and that's one of the things that I love teaching about communications, because, you know, we started out talking about your ethos, your,
Right.
who you are, what your
Mhm.
ground of being is, what your commitment is as a business person is getting created constantly by everything that you say and do.
Right.
I like to tell students that the way you do anything is the way that, as far as anybody else is concerned, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So it's a kind of always on. And so it's worth investing care and attention and thought in every piece of what we're doing, because as you said, everything that you do can be shared instantly.
Right.
And people form impressions, people form opinions, people form ideas
Mhm.
about all of us based on whatever that last interaction was or whatever that last expression was that you put out there.
Right. So from here, I guess the next question for me would be like, I know over the last like few months and years, the Me Too movement in a way was bringing back people, or not, I won't say Me Too, but the communications level from people like Prime Minister Trudeau, who did blackface when he was in college, affecting him years later now, and then I guess the controversy with Jimmy Kimmel, with him doing blackface. Obviously, that's all different forms of communication. How does that like how does communication set from, like, let's say years ago when I was a stupid 15-year-old still affect me today when I'm a 30-year-old who is, let's say, a multi PhD, like the super genius kind of thing?
Well, you know, we all do stupid things, don't we?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think there's anybody, and the older you get, the more moments you have that you say, what was I thinking? Where was my brain when I did that? Thankfully, for those of us of a certain age, it didn't go viral when we
Right.
were 18 or 22 or whatever, and we had a little bit of time to mature. And
Right.
perhaps that's a luxury that people have less today. Um, but I think it just underscores people people know us by what we say and what we do.
Right.
And that used to really annoy me when I first heard that as a young adult, because it was like, I am a worthwhile person. I have these great qualities. I have these great capabilities. I have wonderful insights.
Right.
That matters, doesn't it? That's worth something. But the bottom line is, what people know is what gets expressed out there in the world. The words that
Right.
came out of my mouth and the actions.
Hmm.
That's me as far as anybody else is concerned. And, you know, people say sometimes talk is cheap. Anybody can say anything. I don't think that talk is cheap. I think our words matter. I think language matters, and I think all the forms of language matter. So how we physically express ourselves, the actions that we take, what we do and don't pay attention to, all of those things create an identity.
Mhm.
And I think that matters. And it's going to matter a heck of a lot if you find you're creating an identity that is embarrassing, or that you think, oh, well, I shouldn't have done that. Well, it's out there, you know, and
Whoops.
we can all say, I made a mistake.
Right.
And hopefully people are intelligent enough and generous enough to grant that we all make mistakes.
Hmm. And that nobody's perfect.
And that nobody's perfect. And that we can all say, yeah, I know you did that 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 25 years ago.
Right.
And I'm glad that you now recognize that that probably isn't something you would want to be doing today.
Right.
But it's a heck of a lot easier to think first than to have to
True.
apologize later.
Right. Cool.
So you know, for that reason, I love teaching communication. A lot of times people devalue communication. I think people
kind of faded out when you were saying that.
Oh, did I cut out? Sorry.
Yeah.
That's why I love teaching communication.
Okay.
Because I think that paying attention to the fact, that we're always communicating,
Mm-hmm.
right? Communication is irreversible,
Right.
constant. You know, I can apologize for something, but I can't take it back. And I can't stop it. I can't say, well, I just won't communicate today. If I'm awake and I'm conscious and there's other humans around that are conscious, I'm communicating, you know? So
Right.
I think just gaining an awareness of that, I think is very liberating, because rather than just say, well, I don't know what people are thinking about me. Well, we do have some say in how we're seen and how we're perceived. And why not start shaping it for ourselves?
Cool. This is a very interesting conversation so far, Professor.
I'm a philosopher. What can I say? I'm probably going in a whole different direction.
It's fine, Professor. Totally fine by me. Talking about your philosophy degree, you mentioned earlier that you have a PhD in philosophy. And obviously you're teaching me in my MBA classes as well as other students. How do you kind of fuse the two together?
Well, as I said, philosophy is really a practice of asking questions.
Right.
Practice of inquiry. And I think sometimes in business or in any profession, we tend to prioritize action over asking the question of what's the point? In service of what? What is this for? Remember that video that we watched the other day, Start with Why.
Oh, right.
Why does this matter?
Right.
I taught a class in the business program in organizational development at USF a few years ago. And we actually had the college president come and speak to us. I think he was just a retiring college president, so he had some extra time. And he said that from his perspective, the purpose of a Jesuit education was to be asking always, in service of what? Why are you doing whatever it is that you're doing? And so for me, that dimension of inquiry, of in service of what? What's the purpose? Where are we headed here? What do we really want to accomplish? Not just what's the immediate goal. What do we really want to accomplish doing this? And is this the best way to do that? And what are some of the ramifications? What are going to be some of the consequences, intended and unintended? And I think a lot of times business education doesn't pause to reflect on that. And so I think having people who are able to ask those questions and not just charge ahead with, well, here's the next goal, so we got to do whatever's needed to get that goal. Why is that the next goal? Should it be the next goal? What other goals do we have? I think that's important. to ask those questions. And I was so grateful to find that at Santa Clara, people here agreed that I had something to offer in the business school. I didn't have to convince anybody. Nobody said, what's somebody in philosophy doing pretending to be a business person? A, I had had 25 years in business by that time, or 20 years in business. But B, nobody questioned that perspective would be valuable in business. Manny Velasquez, who's currently the chair of the management department, is a PhD in philosophy. And I was delighted to find that out as well.
Nice.
So I think there are, in philosophy, really, you could do anything with that. You can go into law, you can go into politics, you can go into business, you can go into any profession. It's the ability to think is useful pretty much anywhere.
Right.
So, and I discovered years later that I also love teaching. So It's the best of both worlds for me, because I now get to teach, I get to apply my business experience, and ask a lot of questions.
Cool. So it's kind of like a little sidetrack here. Who's your favorite philosopher, both living and dead?
Ha! Well, I did my dissertation on Martin Heidegger, who's very much out of favor because on that episode. Favorite philosopher? Oh gosh, I don't know. I was very much into phenomenology, and I like the idea. Anybody I'd cite in phenomenology would probably be obscure, but I like the idea of looking at everyday experiences from multiple perspectives, and so that whole view of philosophy for me. And I also appreciate John Rawls in ethics, social ethics. A number of ethical philosophers that I am very drawn to. William James, pragmatism. Yeah.
Cool. So wide range of philosophers so far.
A wide range of philosophers, yes. If you wanted to go into it for a few hours, I'm sure we could have a much more detailed conversation.
Right.
Philosophy doesn't lend itself to sound bites, unfortunately.
Of course. So obviously communicate over the conversation that we've had. Communications is very important, regardless if it's in marketing or in engineering or whatever discipline you're in. For business, at least, how do you think communications will shape the future of both Silicon Valley and businesses around the world, possibly?
I think that communication is the future of business.
Okay.
If you think about the whole point of technology, what are we doing? We're communicating. That's all we're doing. We're having conversations. We're having conversations through media that we never were able to have them before. We're able to have conversations with people all over the planet at a speed and immediacy, and potentially in a depth, although I don't think that we have explored that yet, that we haven't before. I think that the danger perhaps is that we communicate superficially, and we don't take the time and use the technologies available to us to fully understand. I was reading an article in the paper this morning about how did the world miss COVID-19 for 3 months? And it's a very interesting article, but it appears that one of the reasons that it was missed was a discrepancy in language between two papers that were published. And the first one that was published phrased it one way, that this is how COVID-19 is spread through asymptomatic carriers. And the other one said it a little bit differently and challenged the legitimacy of the first study. And while the scholars were fighting over whose wording was better and which one really has the better message, that allowed public health officials to say, oh, well, nobody, there really isn't a consensus, nobody knows anything. And while they did all that, we lost 3 months while the disease was spreading before the information effectively got out there, and people were able to say, oh, well, you know how those academics are, they don't really know anything anyway. I think it was a failure. I think one could say that lost time was a failure in communication.
Right.
And it was a colossal failure on a global scale.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't look that way to the people who were involved at the time. But look what we're dealing with in the meantime.
So much
So
ramifications.
that's a good example of communication matters.
Right.
Even when we don't think, oh, well, this one time, come on, we're just arguing with that other group 20 miles away about how to phrase it. Well, it turns out that was a pretty big oversight.
Right.
And how we language things, I mean, we form our worldview, we form our understanding through language.
Mm-hmm.
How we language things matters.
Cool. I had a few more questions in my head that I totally forgot to jot down. But I guess here's one. I guess the next question from here is like, how can like someone like me who is, I guess, limited in his communication skills because of like engineering and not being good at it or whatever reason, improve on his or her own communication skills to like convince person X to do what they want or something else along those lines?
How can you improve your communication skills of persuasion? Well, that's a lot of what our course is about. I think being able to make messages sticky, get in the world of the person that you're talking to. Instead of trying to get them into my world, how do I get them to understand what I want them to say? I think the first step is to listen. And where are they? What does their world look like? And how can my message serve your interests? Because if I'm not serving what you care about, you're not going to care about anything else that I do have to say.
Right.
So finding out how I can support and serve what somebody else cares about is probably, I think, the most effective way to communicate. And then figure out, okay, what messages, what stories are going to connect with this person or this group? What helps them relate my message to things that are alive for them? Because otherwise I'm just, I'm broadcasting. And I'm hoping that whatever I throw out there lands with somebody. But really, it's only going to land with people who already think the way I do.
Right.
So it's a lot more effective to look at what's that world over there that I want to communicate into?
Mm-hmm.
What counts? What's their reality? What's important in that world? And is there something that I have to offer that fits into your priorities? What's important to you?
Cool. Well, you basically answered all my questions, Professor, indirectly or not directly.
Good.
I do appreciate that.
Good.
I guess we'll end the conversation here.
That sounds fine with me. I'm sorry I now see shadows from the tree leaves, so I
No
apologize
worries.
if that messed up your podcast for you. But
No
hey,
worries,
natural environment, we're out here in nature. There was one other thing I wanted to say before we end, if I may.
Of course.
So I teach a course in sustainable leadership. And one of the questions that you had asked me a couple of days ago was, how do I think business is going to be changing the world or whatever? I think that business has an opportunity to lead in creating a sustainable environment and in helping shape people's awareness that sustainability is all of our job and all of our opportunity. It's a gift that we have in this generation to demonstrate how safeguarding our planet and safeguarding one another, safeguarding human life, all human lives, is a privilege in which we can share, and our economic capabilities and our business acumen is something that we have to offer in that. And I think that the opportunity for business today is enormous. I think it's a very exciting horizon. but I think the risk is that we'll miss it in service of short-term gains, losing track of the big picture. So I would like, I think that keeps me going in the business school. That keeps me saying, yeah, this is where I really want to be, because I do agree that business is a huge force for good in the world, but that we have some choices to make to see that continues.
Yeah, and plus, didn't Amazon pledge like $2 or $3 billion to a bunch of companies or services that help decarbonize the economy in the earth, or something like that?
So, I hope so.
Yeah.
And we'll walk the talk.
Right. Cool.
Maybe we'll watch a video about that in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Thank you, Professor.
All right. Thank you, Niranjan. It's been fun talking to you.
Yes. To my audience, I just want to let you guys know you can find us here on YouTube at the Rhino and the Bat podcast, as well as any Spotify or any other podcast locations, as well as links in the description box down below to our sponsor. Heads up, Spar Soap. But as always, have a good one. See you in the next video. Peace.